Hi, my name is Isabel Hart. I am 26 years old and live in Seattle. It may sound strange, but I have never truly had a Christmas of my own. While my friends look forward to decorated trees, family gatherings, or winter trips, my Christmas has always been tied to the kitchen. Not my own kitchen, but the white kitchen in my parents' house, where I have been turned into an unwilling chef for more than 10 years. It all began when I was 15. It was December 23rd, just 2 days before Christmas. My mother suddenly fell and suffered a severe sprain in her wrist, leaving her unable to hold a knife or stir a pot. Everyone in the house panicked, because that was the first year we planned to host a large holiday dinner for both relatives and friends. I still remember the weary look on my mother's face as she lay on the sofa, then turned her eyes toward me and said, "Isabel can handle it. She's been helping me in the kitchen since she was little." At that moment, I didn't even have the chance to object. I was used to peeling potatoes, washing vegetables, or helping my mom bake cookies, but preparing dinner for nearly 20 people? That was far beyond what a teenage girl could manage, yet no one considered changing the plan or cutting down the menu. Everyone from my father to my sister Olivia simply nodded in agreement, as if the decision was the most natural thing in the world. I cried in the kitchen that first Christmas night. My hands trembled as I pulled the oversized turkey out of the oven, my face burned with embarrassment when the rolls came out slightly scorched, and I nearly fainted from exhaustion as I cleaned, arranged, and served all at once. But when everything was finally set on the table, everyone beamed with joy, raised their glasses, and showered me with praise. "Isabel is amazing," my uncle exclaimed. "She even makes a better turkey than her mom." My father patted me proudly on the shoulder, and my mother smiled as if she had personally trained me into a master chef. In that moment, my heart felt both uplifted and tightened. I was utterly drained, yet the recognition left me floating. I believed I had done something extraordinary for my family. And from that day forward, a new tradition was born. Isabel would cook Christmas dinner every year. At first, I thought it was only because my mother had been injured. But the following year, when she was fully recovered, she still laughed and said, "Isabel did such a great job, let her handle it again." My sister Olivia chimed in as well. "You cook better than I do. If I step into the kitchen, I'll just ruin everything." And ours. And so, year after year, I became the unwilling head chef. I carried the entire burden, from battling the holiday crowds at the supermarket, planning out detailed menus, to waking up at 3 in the morning to begin preparations. Every December, as soon as the month began, the house buzzed with excitement, but that joy was never mine. My mother busied herself decorating the living room, Olivia flaunted her new dress on Instagram, and my father hunched over his guest list. Meanwhile, my routine always began the same way with the grocery store. 3 or 4 days before the party, while Olivia leisurely went to the spa for her hair, and my parents strolled through the luxury shops in downtown Seattle hunting for gifts, I struggled behind a cart overflowing with food. Safeway, Costco, Trader Joe's, I knew every aisle like a long-time employee. A list of dozens of items was always clutched in my hand: an 18-pound turkey, 2 tubs of butter, 10 packs of gluten-free bread, a crate of golden potatoes, all kinds of vegetables to make salad for 30 people, not to mention the ingredients for at least 5 different desserts. I weaved through the crushing crowds, trying to steady myself as I piled heavy bags into the cart. At times, I had to pause just to take a deep breath, my hands red and raw from the cold. For most people, holiday grocery shopping was fun. For me, it was nothing but pressure. When I was 20, the first list stretched nearly 2 full pages. Make sure the turkey is tender, with crispy skin but still juicy inside, my mother wrote in her careful handwriting. Beneath that, another note. Last year's gingerbread was too sweet, cut down on the sugar this time. Then there was, Aunt Marie is vegetarian, remember to prepare something special for her. Cousin Amanda is gluten intolerant, so make sure to have bread without flour. Each instruction felt like another shackle being fastened onto me. I wasn't just responsible for creating a full holiday feast for 30 people, I also had to customize dishes to meet the personal needs of every guest. Outwardly, I forced a smile and nodded, but inside I boiled with frustration. I wasn't a five-star restaurant. I didn't have separate menus for each diner. But to everyone else, it seemed obvious, as if I had been born to serve. Once, I tried to push back. What if this year we change things up? Everyone could bring a dish, it'd add variety, and take some pressure off me. I still remember the look on Olivia's face, a mix of shock and annoyance. Are you trying to turn Christmas dinner into some kind of school potluck? Our tradition is you cook everything. That's what makes it Isabel's Christmas dinner. My mother cut me off instantly. You do it better than anyone. If we hand it over, they'll just ruin it. Those words slammed shut any chance of escape. I bit my lip, turned back to the kitchen, and buried myself once again in elaborate recipes. Gradually, I realized my place in the family was not that of a daughter, but more like a high-end servant. When the guests arrived, Olivia would stand at the door to greet them. My parents would pour drinks and make conversation, and I would disappear behind the kitchen door. Occasionally, someone might pop in, smile, and say, "It smells amazing. Isabel really is the best chef." But a moment later, they would turn and walk away, leaving me buried under a mountain of work. I saw the divide in every small detail. While everyone posed for photos around the Christmas tree, I stood at the sink washing dishes. When laughter and chatter filled the living room, I only heard faint echoes through the steam rising from a pot of soup. Even in the family photos posted on Facebook, my face rarely appeared. And if it did, I was usually in a stained apron, my hair tied up hastily, a wooden spoon in my hand. One time, I asked Olivia, "Do you ever want to try cooking something yourself?" She burst out laughing. "Are you kidding? If I stepped into the kitchen, the whole family would end up ordering pizza. Besides, everyone knows you're better than all of us put together. Stop being so modest." On the surface, it sounded like praise, but underneath it was pure selfishness. I understood that "you do it better" was just their excuse for laziness. They didn't want responsibility, so they pushed it all onto me. When I was 24, I once tried to refuse. That day, I said directly, "I don't want to cook anymore. I want to sit and eat with everyone." The living room instantly fell silent for a few seconds. Then my father spoke, his voice half stern, half reproachful. "Don't be dramatic. Everyone looks forward to your cooking. It's the joy of the whole family. You can't be selfish and ruin Christmas." I still remember the lump in my throat at that moment. My father had called my simple wish to sit at the table a form of selfishness. Yet for years, I had sacrificed every Christmas moment of my own to serve them. I forced a smile, nodded, and returned to the kitchen. But inside, a bitter ache rose within me, like a wound that had never healed. The more time passed, the more I felt that Isabel's Christmas dinner had nothing to do with me anymore. It was only an excuse for the family to indulge without lifting a finger. It became like a family-owned brand, one I was forced to uphold at the same level of service every year. Relatives even told each other, "You must go to Isabel's house for Christmas, the food there is better than at restaurants." Some even brought friends and coworkers along, just to brag. "Our family has a daughter who's the #1 cook." They were proud of me, but not in the way a family should be proud of their child. They didn't care about my work, my dreams, or my personal life. The only thing that made them think of me was my ability to turn the kitchen into a non-stop production line. Every year, when the church bells rang, I found myself left behind in a smoke-filled kitchen. And I began to understand, the recognition I had long craved was nothing but a facade. In reality, they saw me as a high-class servant free of charge and always on call every holiday season. In the twinkling glow of Christmas lights, I would quietly look at my reflection in the refrigerator door. A young woman with a weary face from lack of sleep, flour on her hands, and eyes red from chopping onions. That was not the image of a peaceful holiday. It was the image of devotion being exploited. And I knew that if I didn't make a change, this so-called tradition would bind me for life. If I was the Christmas chef, then Olivia, my sister, had been crowned the Christmas star in my parents' eyes. Each holiday, while I was buried in the smell of onions and melting butter, Olivia only had to sit cross-legged on the sofa, wearing her latest dress, waiting for the guests to arrive so she could flash her charming smile. My mother often spoke as if it were a fair division of labor. Isabel handles the cooking, Olivia manages the family's image. Each of you has your own strength. It sounded reasonable on the surface, but in reality, the family's image was nothing more than Olivia showing off her clothes, striking poses for photos, and collecting admiration from her friends. Meanwhile, my role was heavy, irreplaceable, and left me with no moment of rest. That image Olivia curated was like a small stage, where she played the star while I remained backstage, silently making everything happen. I once tried to remind my mother, "I'd like to greet guests too. I want to talk, to appear in photos." But she waved me off. "Everyone has their own duty, Isabel. You're better suited for the kitchen. Olivia is better with people. That's what keeps the balance." That balance? I asked myself, where was the balance when one person had to wake up at 3 in the morning, working tirelessly for hours, while the other simply smiled and was showered with praise? The unfairness became even clearer once Olivia began building her own career. She worked in public relations, a field where appearances, networking, and parties mattered more than actual skill. So, every Christmas, Olivia didn't just invite family and close friends, she used the dinner as a stage to promote herself. Last year, she walked into the kitchen holding a list longer than a roll of toilet paper. "Here's this year's guest list," Olivia announced, her voice firm like she was giving an order. 30 people in total. Most of them are my colleagues and business partners. "Isabel, make sure you prepare enough food. They're very important for my career." I stared at the paper in shock. It was filled with names I had never even heard before, people from Olivia's PR firm, new acquaintances from networking events, and even a few marked as VIP guests. In that moment, I realized the Christmas dinner that once belonged to our family had turned into Olivia's personal showcase. And me? I was nothing more than a backstage staff member hired to serve her career. I hesitated. 30 people? Are you sure about this? That's twice as many as before. Olivia shot me a look, raising her brows. You're good at this, Isabel. You always manage. Everyone looks forward to Isabel's Christmas dinner, after all. Those words might have sounded like praise, but to me, they felt like a sentence. I no longer had a choice. I was bound by the very brand they had stamped onto me. That evening, as I sat in the kitchen reviewing the list, my mother walked in. She placed a hand on my shoulder and said firmly, "Remember, this year has to be even more perfect than the last. Olivia's guests are very important. We can't afford to lose face." I turned to look at her, a wave of bitterness rising inside me. "And what about me, Mom? Where does my importance lie?" But I didn't say it out loud. Instead, I simply nodded and whispered, "I understand." That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. I pictured the family laughing in the living room, Olivia linking arms with her colleagues, showing off the signature family dinner, while I sweated in the kitchen. The image played over and over in my mind like a cruel reminder. I had been trapped too long in the supporting role of my own life story. It was almost ironic. Out in society, Olivia was praised as a successful image builder, and at home, my mother honored her as the face of the family. Meanwhile, despite all my time and energy, I was only remembered when someone complimented the turkey or complained that the sauce was a little too salty. I began to feel that I wasn't just being used, I was being erased. Every action of mine, shopping, cooking, cleaning, gradually became invisible in their eyes. Only the final result, the feast laid out on the table, was acknowledged. And even that recognition wasn't given to me, but to Olivia. She would casually tell her colleagues, "This is our family dinner. Isabel just handles the kitchen part." Just the kitchen part? I laughed bitterly to myself. Without me, could Olivia have possibly hosted 30 important guests? When the clock struck midnight, I sat up with a heavy heart. I had cried countless times in that kitchen, so many that I'd lost track. Tears fell onto the wooden counter, mingling with the sharp sting of onions, dripping into the bubbling sauce on the stove. Once, while scrubbing a mountain of dishes stacked higher than the sink, my arms gave out and I sank to the floor, burying my face in my hands as I whispered, "Is this really Christmas? Why have I never been allowed to enjoy it?" For me, Christmas had always meant exhaustion, loneliness, and tears. I had never experienced a true Christmas. No strolling under the holiday lights, no moments by the fireplace, no snowball fights with friends. All I ever had were 3 a.m. alarm clocks and long nights in a smoke-filled kitchen. The older I grew, the more I realized I was trapped in a harsh cycle, pleasing others just to be acknowledged. I believed that if I cooked well enough, they would love and cherish me. But the truth? They only cherished the food, never the person who made it. That exhaustion piled up year after year, until one day my body finally rebelled. After an especially stressful Christmas, I collapsed right on the kitchen floor from sheer exhaustion. I woke up in the hospital with the diagnosis: severe stress and sleep deprivation. The doctor asked me, "Why did you push yourself to this point?" I had no answer, only pressed my lips together and burst into tears. It was after that incident that I decided to see a therapist. At first, I thought it would feel embarrassing to talk about Christmas kitchen duty with a professional. But the doctor, a middle-aged woman named Dr. Campbell, listened with eyes full of compassion. In our first session, she asked me, "Isabel, do you actually enjoy cooking?" I replied, "I used to, when I was little. But not anymore. Now it just feels like a burden." She nodded. "Then, why do you keep doing it?" I bit my lip, thought for a moment, and said, "Because if I don't, Christmas will fall apart, my family will be disappointed. And they'll blame me." Dr. Campbell gently continued, "And if Christmas does fall apart, then what? What's the worst that could happen?" I hesitated. Maybe they'd have to figure it out themselves. They'd be angry with me. Maybe they'd even hate me. "And are you sure that would be a bad thing?" she asked. "If they only love you when you cook for them, is that truly love? Do you realize you've allowed them to exploit your devotion instead of appreciating it?" Her words felt like someone had ripped away a blindfold. For years, I had shackled myself to the identity of a people-pleaser. I believed sacrifice meant love, but Dr. Campbell showed me the clear line between genuine love and being used. In the following sessions, I learned to ask myself, what do I actually want for my Christmas? The answer came immediately. I want to sit at the table, to laugh and talk, to be part of the family, not hidden away behind the kitchen door. Dr. Campbell smiled. Then try to imagine a Christmas like that. No cooking, no endless lists. Just you, surrounded by people who truly value you. I closed my eyes, and for the first time, I pictured a different Christmas Eve, sitting beside Aunt Martha, the only one who had ever defended me against unfairness. I heard the gentle sound of carols, smelled the warmth of mulled cider, and laughed with people who wanted nothing from me except my presence. The image blurred my eyes with tears. That was the Christmas I had always longed for. From that day on, a new resolve began to grow inside me. I knew I couldn't go on like this. I needed a way out. No arguments, no shouting, just a silent rebellion, a way to make them see my true worth by disappearing at the moment they needed me most. That night, when the whole house had fallen asleep, I quietly picked up my phone and dialed Aunt Martha's number. Her voice came through the line warm, familiar. I choked up as I told her everything from being handed all the cooking responsibilities to Olivia dropping a list of 30 guests onto my shoulders. I confessed that I had never had a real Christmas, that I felt like nothing more than a servant in my own family. Aunt Martha was silent for a moment, then she spoke softly. "Isabel, you don't have to endure this anymore. Christmas is not meant to be a burden. If you're tired, come to me. Here, we'll cook a few simple dishes together, decorate the tree, and you'll sit at the table like everyone else." I burst into tears, both from relief and from gratitude. My aunt had opened her arms to me exactly when I needed it most. That night, I opened my laptop and searched for a flight to Denver. Just picturing myself sitting beside Aunt Martha, Raising a glass of mulled wine as Christmas carols played filled my heart with warmth. I knew this Christmas would be different because for the first time, I would not be alone. I knew my plan would cause chaos. But the more I thought about it, the lighter I felt. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just dreaming of a different Christmas, I was daring to make it real. I decided to book a flight to Denver just 1 week before Christmas. That night, after a therapy session with Dr. Campbell, I sat alone in my small Seattle apartment, my hands trembling over the keyboard. Holiday tickets were expensive, but I knew I couldn't let money become another excuse holding me back. I pressed confirm as if I were signing a contract of freedom with myself. Denver, the place where Aunt Martha lived, had never been included in my family's trips. She was the excluded one. When I was 12, she once spoke out against my mother at a party, saying, "Tradition can't be an excuse to force a child to carry the burden of everything." Those words enraged the family. From then on, she was branded as rebellious and gradually pushed out of all gatherings. But in my memory, Aunt Martha was the only one who ever placed her hand on my shoulder and whispered, "You deserve a seat at the table, Isabel." Now, I wasn't just going to her to escape, I was going to find a place where I truly belonged. I began preparing in silence. I pulled a medium-sized suitcase from under my bed and packed a few warm outfits, a pair of snow boots, and a scarf Aunt Martha had given me years ago. I tucked the suitcase into the trunk of my car, hiding it beneath an old blanket. If anyone happened to look inside, all they would see were a few boxes of cookies and some decorations. I excused as taking back to Mom and Dad's. On the 22nd of December, I still went grocery shopping as usual, picking up some basic ingredients to avoid suspicion. My mother stood by the kitchen door, watching as I unloaded the bags onto the counter. "Good job," she said. "This year Olivia has important guests, so make sure everything is perfect. We can't afford to lose face." I nodded and replied, "Yes, I'll take care of it all." Inside, I almost laughed bitterly. They had no idea this would be the last time I ever said those words. On the evening of the 23rd of December, the whole family gathered in the living room to discuss the plan for the next day. Olivia, wearing a bright red dress and holding a glass of wine, went on and on about her guest list, colleagues from her PR firm, a few potential business partners, and even her big boss. My parents sat listening, nodding with pride. Then it was my turn. My mother turned to me and said, "Isabel, you'll start at 3 a.m., right? The turkey needs 6 hours in the oven, and there are more than a dozen side dishes. Everything must be more perfect than last year. This is Olivia's chance to make an impression at work. We cannot fail." I looked up and caught Olivia's gaze, confident, almost triumphant, as if I were nothing more than a tool for her career. In that moment, I almost told the truth that I wouldn't be cooking, that tomorrow the kitchen would stand empty. But I swallowed the words back down. I knew I had to keep the secret until the very end. So instead, I smiled and said softly, "Yes, I'll wake up at 3. Everything will be just as perfect as every year. You don't have to worry." My mother let out a relieved sigh, and Olivia turned away to continue chatting with my father. No one noticed the flicker of determination in my eyes. That night, I lay in my old room upstairs at my parents' house. Laughter still echoed from the living room, but I no longer felt the sting I used to. Instead, my heart pounded with both nerves and excitement. I was carrying a secret that would change everything. Before I went to sleep, I opened my phone and looked at the ticket saved in my app. A 5 a.m. flight, leaving Seattle and landing in Denver at 9. I pictured Aunt Martha waiting for me at the airport, her warm embrace replacing the cold indifference of my family. I whispered quietly to myself, "Tomorrow, for the first time, I will have a Christmas of my own." The alarm buzzed softly in the dark. I opened my eyes and glanced at the clock. 2:45 a.m. Every other year, this was the moment I would drag myself out of bed, head straight to the kitchen, start thawing the turkey, and prepare the oven and pots and pans. But this year, everything was different. I sat up, my heart racing, ears straining for any sound. The house was silent, only the wind whistling outside the window. Downstairs was pitch black. Everyone was still fast asleep, dreaming of a perfect Christmas built on my labor. I quietly moved to the corner of the room and pulled out the small suitcase I had hidden under a blanket. The wheels bumped softly against the wooden floor, and the sound made me hold my breath for a few seconds. But no one stirred. I inhaled deeply, lifted the suitcase, and stepped into the hallway. The wooden stairs creaked under my feet, as though trying to betray me. I bit my lip, moving slowly, gripping the banister tightly. When I finally reached the first floor, I let out a long, quiet breath. The front door loomed ahead. I carefully turned the latch, eased it open, and a rush of icy air hit my face. Seattle at night had a beauty of its own. The sky was deep black, but the streets sparkled with Christmas lights. Houses in my parents' neighborhood glowed with dazzling decorations, some draped with hundreds of twinkling bulbs. Snow blanketed the sidewalks, reflecting the lights and filling the street with a golden-orange glow. I pulled my coat tighter, my hands trembling not only from the cold, but from the feeling that I was committing a crime. But what crime was it, really? For the first time in my life, I was simply refusing to shoulder a tradition that had been forced on me. At exactly 3 a.m., instead of turning on the oven for the turkey, I stepped into the taxi I had booked through the app. The driver, a middle-aged Korean man, glanced back with a smile. Heading to the airport? Busy time right now. Lots of people flying early to make it home for the holidays. I nodded, saying nothing more. Inside me, a quiet joy stirred. For the first time, I too was flying somewhere to reunite for Christmas, but not with those who exploited me, rather with someone who accepted me for who I was. The car rolled down the empty road. Seattle still glowed brightly, but with an unusual quietness. The familiar streets where I had once rushed to buy endless ingredients now slipped past the window, silent and distant. I looked at the storefronts and the glowing lights, and it felt as if I were bidding farewell to a part of my old life. When the taxi pulled up to the terminal, my heart pounded in my chest. I grabbed my suitcase and rolled it across the snowy ground, leaving a long track behind me. Inside the airport, the air was warmer but alive with chaos. People crowded together, carrying gifts, hugging, laughing. A pang of envy struck me. Why had all my Christmases been nothing but grease and tears? As I stood in line for check-in, I heard a soft voice behind me. "Isabel?" I turned, stunned to see some distant relatives part of Aunt Martha's side. It was Uncle Ben, his wife, and their 2 sons, whom I had only met briefly at a few family gatherings when I was younger. I remembered they had once been close with Aunt Martha, and because of that, they too had slowly been pushed away by my family. Uncle Ben looked surprised. "You're flying to Denver too?" I nodded, unable to hide my smile. "I'm going to spend Christmas with Aunt Martha." He laughed, clapped me on the shoulder. "Well, that's perfect. We're on the same flight. Martha will be overjoyed to see you." The group laughed and chatted, drawing me into their circle. For the first time, I felt lighter than ever. No more loneliness, no more running away alone. I was traveling with people who had also been excluded, yet they brought me a warmth of belonging. As the plane lifted off, I gazed down at the city of Seattle sinking into the dark night, its lights sparkling like thousands of stars. Every year at this hour, I would be standing in the kitchen, adjusting oven temperatures, terrified of ruining a dish. But now, I was seated by the window, holding a cup of hot coffee, listening to the steady hum of the engines, on my way to a different Christmas, the first in 11 years that truly felt free. I closed my eyes, leaned back against the seat, and smiled. Inside me, a whisper rose. "I'm free, I've truly escaped." When the plane landed in Denver, my phone buzzed nonstop. I didn't turn it on right away, but just seeing the little message icon with the number 12 was enough to guess what must be happening back in Seattle. At home, they had probably just woken up, expecting to find me bustling in the kitchen, the turkey already thawing, pots and pans lined up, everything in motion. Instead, the kitchen would be nothing but a cold, empty space. No smell of gingerbread. No clatter of knives and cutting boards, no me. I finally switched on my phone as I sat in Aunt Martha's car after she picked me up. Immediately, my father's name flashed across the screen. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. Isabel. His voice roared, like thunder in the winter sky. Where are you? Do you even know what day it is? I closed my eyes, drew in a deep breath. I know, it's Christmas. Then why is the kitchen empty? No turkey, nothing. Do you expect 30 people to sit and stare at each other? You've humiliated this family. I was silent for a few seconds. My heart pounded, but for the first time in my life, I felt no fear. Only relief. Dad, I said slowly. You and Mom will manage on your own. On the other end of the line, there was a brief silence, then my father erupted. What did you just say? You're abandoning us? How dare you be so ungrateful? You've destroyed tradition. You've shamed this entire family. That what? I bit my lip, my hand tightening around the phone. For years, I had heard those same words over and over, selfish, ruining Christmas like a broken record. But now, they no longer chained me. My voice came out calm. I haven't destroyed anything. I'm simply refusing to play the role of chef that you forced on me. I want a Christmas of my own. No one in this family agrees to that. My father snapped. I know, I said with a soft laugh. But I don't need anyone's approval to live my life. Ho! I hung up before he could say another word. My heart raced, sweat dampened my palms, but I felt a surge of freedom spreading through my chest. Seconds later, the phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. Then Olivia. Then a flood of numbers, relatives, cousins, one after another. I watched the screen flash, then pressed the power button. Silence filled the car, as if I had just shut the final door on my old home. While I sat in Aunt Martha's car, the streets of Denver blanketed in white snow, I pictured the chaos in Seattle. My mother rushing into the kitchen, finding nothing prepared. Olivia screaming, "My guests are arriving, how dare Isabel leave us like this?" Then the scrambling would begin. Olivia would insist on ordering from a restaurant, but it was the 25th of December. Most restaurants were closed, and the few still open had been fully booked weeks in advance. I imagined my mother stumbling into a convenience store, desperately trying to salvage a few rotisserie chickens or frozen side dishes. My father would be pacing, furious, barking at everyone, yet with no choice but to settle for whatever ready-made food they could scrape together. In my mind, I pictured them laying out trays of food in a rush, a half-thawed frozen turkey, canned pasta, a few pre-packaged salads from the supermarket. Nothing could ever compare to the carefully prepared feasts I had once put together. And right at that moment, Olivia's important guests would begin arriving. They had been expecting Isabel's Christmas dinner, the brand my family had bragged about for years. Instead, they would find a cold, empty kitchen, frantic hosts, and a dining table cluttered with cheap, mismatched food. Olivia would no doubt lose her temper. I could almost hear her whispering angrily to my mother. "You've ruined everything. My boss will think I was exaggerating." My mother would point the blame at me, while my father muttered about his ungrateful daughter. But none of them could change the fact that, for the first time in 11 years, they no longer had a pawn to command. In the car, Aunt Martha gently placed her hand on my shoulder, as if she could feel the tension running through me. "You just fought your first battle, didn't you?" she asked, her eyes soft. I smiled faintly and nodded. Yes. Dad called. He was furious, but I wasn't afraid anymore. Aunt Martha smiled. "That's the mark of freedom, Isabel. The moment you dare to say no, you realize the chains were only ever an illusion." I leaned my head against the car window, watching rows of snow-covered pines blur past. For the first time, I felt like I was no longer just a servant in someone else's story. I had stood up, faced them, and chosen my own path. In Denver, I sat inside Aunt Martha's cozy home, surrounded by people who truly cared for me, feeling an unusual sense of peace. But back in Seattle, at 9 in the morning, a nightmare was just beginning. The first guests arrived, full of excitement. They had heard Olivia boasting for weeks. My sister Isabel makes the best Christmas dinner. No one in this city can compare. Some even brought expensive bottles of wine, believing they would pair perfectly with the legendary feast. As the door opened, Olivia beamed, masking her unease behind a layer of red lipstick. Welcome, welcome. Come in, make yourselves comfortable. The food will be ready any moment. But only a few minutes later, the truth unraveled. One curious guest wandered down to the kitchen, intending to compliment the family's famous chef. Instead of the rich aroma of roasting turkey, he found a cold, silent space. The counters were bare, the oven dark, the pots and pans spotless as if no one had touched them at all. The guest returned to the living room, hesitant. Where's Isabel? The kitchen doesn't look like it's been prepared at all. His words dropped like a spark into dry straw. Every eye in the room turned toward Olivia. My mother quickly stood up, sweat breaking across her forehead. Oh, Isabel, she must have just stepped out for a moment. Everything's ready, she said, her voice trembling. But inside, she was in full panic. Meanwhile, more guests kept arriving, dressed in fur coats, carrying gifts, their smiles wide with anticipation. Yet when they entered the dining room, all they saw on the table were a few store-bought dishes that my mother and Olivia had hastily laid out, completely lacking the care and detail they were used to. Silence began to spread, replacing the cheerful greetings. The guests started whispering. One of Olivia's colleagues muttered, "This is the legendary dinner. I thought there'd be a massive turkey, homemade cranberry sauce." Another frowned. "This chicken's so dry, it's like chewing paper." A child blurted out across the table. "This pie is still frozen inside." Laughter erupted, but it wasn't joy, it was disappointment. A few guests quietly slipped on their coats, making excuses about urgent plans. Others were less subtle, openly scoffing. "This is the worst Christmas dinner in history." Olivia sat frozen, her face burning with shame. The criticism cut into her like knives into the very career she had built on a perfect image. My parents scrambled back and forth, trying desperately to salvage the situation, but the more they explained, the clearer the truth became: this dinner only ever existed because of me. Without me, everything fell apart. I wasn't there, but later, through the messages I read, I could picture it vividly. One relative sent me a short note. "You embarrassed the whole family, but thanks to that, they finally understood your worth." In Olivia's house that day, chaos and humiliation filled the air. Whispers, headshakes, suspicious glances all turned toward Olivia, the one who had boasted endlessly about Isabel's dinner. And my parents, for the first time, had to lower their heads in shame before their guests. Somewhere deep down, I believe they finally realized, all those years, they had taken me for granted, and this was the price to pay. In contrast, Christmas in Denver was warm and alive. Strings of lights glowed softly along the eaves. Inside, the family gathered around the tree, hanging ornaments and tinsel together, many hands, not just mine alone. The scent of mulled cider and cinnamon cookies filled the air. Aunt Martha smiled and pulled me closer to the tree. "You came just in time. We've been waiting for someone to place the star on top." I looked up and saw they had deliberately left the final touch for me. My heart tightened, and tears welled in my eyes. For the first time, I was invited to join in rather than being shut away in the kitchen. That evening, we sat down to dinner. Not at a grand table with 30 guests, but at a simple wooden one, seating 8. On the table, each dish carried someone's personal touch. Aunt Martha made her traditional stew, Uncle Ben prepared a salad, my cousins baked apple pies, and me, I contributed only a bottle of wine I had grabbed at the airport. No one criticized, no one judged. Instead, we raised our glasses, sang carols, and laughed when someone missed the beat. I sat there, surrounded by warm laughter, feeling as though I had just reclaimed a part of my life I had long lost. No longer the one hidden behind the kitchen door, I was seated at the table, heard, seen, valued. I was a guest, a family member, someone important not because of the food I brought, but simply because I was me. Of course, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Yet some of the messages carried a very different tone. Ethan, my cousin, wrote, "I'm proud of you. You finally stood up for yourself. Another cousin added, Isabel, the dinner in Seattle was chaos. But because of that, everyone realized how vital you are. Don't let anyone make you feel small again. I read each line, my heart aching yet relieved. Clearly, the ones who truly cared understood. They didn't blame me, didn't demand from me, they praised my courage. As for those who only saw me through the lens of lavish feasts, they would never understand, and they didn't deserve my sacrifice anymore. That night, when it came time to clear the table, I helped with the dishes. But unlike every year before, I wasn't alone. Someone stood beside me rinsing, another dried, another put things away. We worked while singing along, laughter spilling out between verses. Suddenly, the chores felt light because they were shared. I realized then, the problem was never the cooking or the cleaning. I could do it, I had even enjoyed it once. The difference was this: here, I was appreciated. In Seattle, I was taken for granted. Before bed, I glanced at my phone again. My inbox was full of missed calls. A few new messages had softened in tone. Honey, I'm sorry, but you shouldn't have done it so suddenly. I shouldn't have yelled, but you have to understand the pressure we face today. Olivia's, however, was blunt. You ruined me, I'll never forgive you. I looked at that last line and let out a sad smile. It was the clearest proof yet. Olivia had never truly seen me as her sister, only as a tool to serve her. And now that the tool refused to function, she felt betrayed. I set my phone down and turned toward Aunt Martha. She was making tea, her eyes gentle. She spoke softly. Do you see now, Isabel? When you dare to step out, you finally see who truly loves you. Who stays, who leaves, it all reveals itself. If you don't want to go back home yet, stay here with me. I nodded, tears streaming down my cheeks, but a smile spreading across my lips. I knew then that this Christmas had changed my life forever. I was no longer the cook chained by tradition. I was Isabel Hart, an independent woman who knew her own worth. And I understood, from now on, only those who truly valued me deserved a place in my life. In the days after Christmas, I neither called my parents nor replied to their messages. I let the silence stretch. And it was that very silence that forced my family to face the truth. They could no longer rely on me to uphold a tradition that only served them. In January, my father was the one who called me. His voice sounded more tired than I had ever heard it. Isabel, we didn't handle things well this year. Your mother and I realize we can't put everything on you. Next year, maybe we should do things differently. Please, come home, we miss you. I didn't answer right away. I wanted to hear what else he had to say. Then my mother chimed in, we'll do a potluck. Everyone brings a dish. Whoever comes has to contribute. No more leaving everything to you. I was momentarily surprised. It was hard to believe that the very people who once clung so fiercely to the tradition of Isabel cooking the entire feast were now willing to change. But then I realized the shock of that last Christmas had forced them to wake up. And indeed, from the following year on, Christmas in my family was never the same. Instead of me rising at 3 a.m, everyone brought a dish to share. Some brought salad, others cookies, some picked up rotisserie chickens from the supermarket. The food was simpler, sometimes far from perfect, but the atmosphere was lighter, more genuine, and truly connected. Interestingly, a few relatives who had grown accustomed to being served stopped showing up. They claimed to be busy or hosted their own gatherings. I didn't feel sad. I understood that they had only come to the dinners for the benefit of enjoying my hard work. Once that benefit disappeared, their absence was simply proof of the truth. In contrast, those who remained, the ones who truly valued me, became closer. Ethan, my cousin, often volunteered to help me prepare a small dish. Aunt Martha, though far away, joined us through video calls to chat during the meal. My parents, still clumsy in their efforts, at least learned to ask, Isabel, what would you like to cook this year? If you'd rather not, that's okay too. That question, simple as it seemed, felt like enormous recognition to me. I was no longer the one burdened with everything. I cooked only if I wanted to, and only the dishes I enjoyed. One year, I baked an apple pie, my true favorite. Another year, I did nothing at all and just brought a bottle of wine. And the best part was, no one criticized, no one complained. Through many Christmases, I have learned one important truth. Choosing myself is not selfish, it is necessary. Because when I failed to set boundaries, I was unintentionally teaching others that they could take advantage of me forever. But when I finally dared to say no, I taught them something else, that love is not exploitation, but respect. I know there are still people who don't understand, who even see me as the child who betrayed tradition. But that no longer wounds me. I see it clearly now. Who stayed, who left, it was all a natural filtering. Those who truly loved me chose to remain by my side. Those who only saw me as a free cook excluded themselves from my life. Looking back from where I stand now, I realize that the Christmas morning when I walked out at 3 a.m. was the turning point. It not only freed me from a suffocating cycle, but it also transformed my family. My parents stopped bragging to their friends about Isabel's legendary feast. And Olivia, though furious at first, eventually learned after a few years to host her own gatherings, to take responsibility for the promises she made. I am different now. I have found peace. I've spent Christmases in Denver with Aunt Martha, where I could sit at the table, laugh, sing, and simply be myself. I've also spent Christmases in Seattle, but now they are gentler, no more shouting, no more crushing pressure to please everyone. Above all, I've reclaimed my belief in my own worth. I no longer need to prove myself with elaborate feasts in order to be loved. I deserve love simply because I am Isabel, not because of how well I can cook. If you are listening to this story, maybe you too have been in my place carrying burdens, making sacrifices, just to feel seen. But remember this. Sometimes, loving your family doesn't mean carrying everything on your shoulders. It means setting boundaries. Only when you stop letting others exploit you will they learn to respect you. I once believed Christmas was a cage that trapped me. But now, Christmas is the time I live truthfully, the time I know that freedom doesn't come from pleasing others, it comes from daring to choose yourself. And I believe, if I could do it, so can you. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.